Welcome to the TCM Challenge, a monthly movie review podcast where Matt and I challenge each other to watch some classic films. This month's movie is 1947's They Won't Believe Me, and I'm Matt in Buffalo.
And I'm Matt in Arizona.
All right, Matt, it's good to be back. We're on to our second episode
Yeah,
already.
we
Time has
got
kind of flown.
the pilots in the bag, and I feel like we're hitting our stride. It's very exciting to be back.
So, do you want to just jump right back into it?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, so first we need to kind of reset. We're still new at this. Got to refresh the gimmick of the show.
Uh huh.
Basically, every month we pick from a random number generator 5 movies that are airing, this month being July, on Turner Classic Movies. From those, we alternate back and forth, picking which one we may be subjecting each other to or, sharing a love with, however it may go. So, to recap, the selections for this month were Captain Sinbad from 1963, 1968's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which was my bet that you were going to select that as the comfort food movie, even though it might be kind of crap. But 1947's They Won't Believe Me, 1940's New Moon, and 1937 Man of the People. So I don't think we have to go through them too much, but why did you settle on They Won't Believe Me? And did you have any exposure to this movie before you selected it?
No, well, to answer the second question, no, I hadn't even heard of it. I looked at the fire selections and thought that it's in 1947. It's about someone ending up on trial for murder and love triangles and all that sort of stuff. And I just knew that was instantly I identified it as a noir pick. Um, I have a guilty pleasure for noirs. Some are really good and some I just love for the aesthetic. But when combining murder, drama, thriller, that's kind of up my alley, more so than the kids film for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. So uh, I was like, I've never seen this before, but I was instantly taken up by the little blurb that you gave me, which, to remind people, was a philandering playboy with a wealthy wife and 2 girlfriends ends up on trial for murder when 2 of the ladies turn up dead, and he's the most likely suspect.
That is kind of a delicious description for the movie.
Yeah.
So I can see why you would have picked that one. So before we get into the movie proper, we always do the level setting discussion on what was the movie landscape at the time, considering we might pick maybe some obscure movies at times. So this was the 20th Academy Awards from March 1948. That would have been the year that this movie would have been eligible. The movies were, and the winner was Gentleman's Agreement, The Bishop's Wife, Crossfire, Great Expectations, and The Miracle on 34th Street. Really, my
Yes.
only exposure there was I was aware of Gentleman's Agreement and Great Expectations, but Miracle on 34th Street's the only one I've seen. And that's
My
ages
favorite
back
Christmas
now.
movie. I love that
Oh,
movie.
really?
Yeah.
I can't really fault you there. I mean, the correct answer is, of course, Die Hard, but we can move on. And then we always also look at the top grossing pictures of the year, and kind of going through this, like it got me wondering, was 1947 kind of a light year for classics? Because I'm not terribly familiar, and again, we never claim to be the super experts here, but Welcome Stranger, The Egg, I'm missing the second half of that one.
The Egg and
Uh,
I.
yeah, yes, The Egg and I.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's one of my mom's favorite comedies. I've seen it.
Unconquered, Life and Father, and Forever Amber. So I'm not too familiar with that, but I kind of went back and like, what are some of the ones that are maybe a little bit more well remembered? It was kind of a year of Bing Crosby. You had Road to Rio and Welcome Stranger, 2 big
Hmm.
Bing Crosby movies, another Sinbad movie, and Possessed. So it's like, I don't want to say like 1947 was like a down year, but I kind of think it was maybe like a little bit of like a forgotten year.
Well, I try to wonder what was going on at the time. 1947. We're just 2 years out from the end of World War II. I think society is finding itself again. We're about to go through. The U.S. is emerging as a superpower in the world. And I guess Hollywood's getting its act back together now that it no longer has to worry about making newsreels and war promo films.
And maybe a bit of a down year. If I may, I'm going to extend that's my thesis for this movie, that this is kind of maybe a forgotten gem. I'm going to show my hand a little bit right off the bat. But shall we get into They Won't Believe Me?
Yeah, and I'm gonna say I might be echoing that sentiment. Not to show my
Okay.
hand either.
Yeah. So before we get into the movie proper, let me just call out the glorious RKO logo that starts the movie.
The classic RKO logo. That if anyone's seen old films, you've seen this logo.
Oh, it's just, I mean, there's a lot of art and like flashy logos that are out in modern pictures, obviously, but this is like a gem. Just the radio tower on top of a spinning globe, just gorgeous. Oh, and
with
by the
the
way, oh, go on, go on.
with the superimposed electrical bolts of energy coming out of
Yeah,
it.
and at least I think we probably did. You watch it streaming? I got a Blu-ray from the
I
day.
could not find this on streaming. I had to order the Blu-ray from Amazon. So I was hoping I was going to end up liking this movie because I was going to
Yeah.
about to own it.
Well, I'm committing to getting the Blu-ray or the Criterion Collection for everything that we do on the show. But right off the bat, this was a restoration that came out a couple years ago, really, and it looks great. And you see that immediately off the
Yeah,
bat with the
I,
RKO
I don't know
logo.
if yeah, I don't know if you got the same Blu-ray that I did. You probably did because I can't imagine there's too many reissues. But this was like
No,
a Warner Brothers archive reissued, remastered Blu-ray. And yeah, I whatever was on my Blu-ray, the transfer was great. It was nice and
oh
crisp.
yeah, and it's the full restoration because there was for years and years a shortened version of this movie because it's a lean 90 plus,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
there's
not
edited
just
versions down that get it 80 minutes.
yeah, not to show my hand too much about my thoughts on this movie, but I don't know about you, but it was like I was into it and blink and it's over. It's a cool 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's crisp. It's like, you know, there's not too much action at all, right? But every scene felt like it had a lot of purpose and soft action around it,
Right,
and it just drove, right? So,
right.
okay, getting right into it. First off, like very kind of ominous music set over like nature imagery, which for the longest time is completely out of place with everything in the movie, right? So it's setting such a weird, different tone from, well, you jump into a court scene, but then New York, LA, very
But
urban culture stuff for a long time.
if you've seen any of these old noir films, I mean, even the fact that it's in front of nature, just the dark, foreboding music. I mean, one of my other favorite noir esque films, Niagara, with Marilyn Monroe, starts pretty much the same way. Shots of nature, dark, ominous music. I was immediately feeling what I was hoping to feel from this movie.
Yeah, foreboding. You don't know what's coming. So right off the bat, I'll say I get my favorite character of the movie. As soon as we jump to the court scene, it's your just bizarre southern like defense attorney talking to like a bizarre crowd. So I'm going to resist the temptations, but maybe I'll go into a little bit. Can you swear to the
I
authenticity of this court's setup?
not well. I wasn't around in 1947, so I don't know. It's a little weird to see the the table set up that the way they were. I'm just gonna say, I realize it's for dramatic effect. I realize that it was 1947, but I mean, becoming a lawyer myself has made watching other lawyering in TV shows and movies much more difficult for me. Not that I didn't enjoy the scene, but it's like the whole time I'm just questioning both of these lawyers' choices for no particular reason other than I've done this.
Oh, good Lord, Matt, you're talking to a scientist. How can I watch any science movies or shows without feeling the same thing? So, yeah, you're preaching to the choir there. But the gimmick, the central premise of this movie is that the at the point of us joining it, the prosecution is already rested in a trial,
And
right?
they've put on about three or four witnesses.
Right. And this movie actually lends itself really well to rewatching, like immediately, because you're introduced to five characters that you may not see until very deep into the movie, 90 minutes, right? But
Right.
very deep into the movie. So you see it's a store clerk, it's a one of the girlfriends of the movie, a detective, a businessman, and the I think it was like the roommate, right? Of
The
uh,
of Verna.
Verna, right? So it's you're introduced to these characters and you have no idea what they're doing,
But
and
by
you
the way,
don't get to
so
see the trial at all. But go,
right,
yes,
and
go
so
ahead.
to set the scene here, we're on trial for the our main character whose name is Lawrence Ballantyne. Is on trial for the murder of who we're told is the murder of Verna Carlson.
Right, which I had to go back and rewatch because as it goes on, you're like, oh, they only mention the name once, real quick, and you're
I see.
introduced to two
I caught
women,
it.
and it's
I
like
caught it.
it's easy to
I,
lose it.
I caught it the first time round, so I was waiting for someone named Verna to pop up in the flashback. But the it's kind of cool. I mean, the setup for this movie is like you were saying. The prosecution is rested. The defense only plans on calling one witness, and of course, it's the defendant. And this movie, 90% of it is flashbacks to the events that happened while he's testifying.
Right, and should we talk about Robert Young,
Yeah,
Larry, our main star of this? He is most known for Father Knows
Father knows
Best,
best. Yeah.
right? And he had like an interview talking about where he's only ever played the bad guy once in the movie Bond, referring to this. And I found him to be like a really interesting um, twist on the film noir characters. He is sympathetic at points and incredibly sleazy and unlikable at others.
Because I was going to say that was going to be my question to you. It's interesting for him to categorize this as a villain because I was going to say, do you think he's a villain? Because I think at times you're right. I think he's a cad and a total sleaze. But
Well, I think we have to look at
we're
every one of his indiscretions individually and then get to the end
right,
of the movie because that's the thing. The movie is challenging you to ask that or answer that, right? And to deal with it. So, first off, it's like right off the bat, I enjoyed watching him all throughout the movie. He was super interesting to watch just because, like, how he played everything. Because when he had to be charming, he was, right?
right. It's kind of a twist. You're right. I wanted to build off on that because when after I saw the movie, I kind of watched the you know how TCM does the intro outro where they introduce the movie, they kind of give the background on what it is, and
Yep.
after the movie they kind of wrap it up. So the guy who was introing this commented that this is kind of a twist instead of these typical film noirs where we have a femme fatale. This guy is kind of a kind of a homme fatale.
Yes. And people will, like, maybe point out, oh, no, no, Verna is the classical femme fatale. But I think we need
You
to kind of
think,
get to her when we get to her. Let's wait
right?
because we have two other women to get through before we get to her. So, shall we jump into the actual flashback elements of this?
Right. So the movie opens. He takes a stand to testify and tells his story, and here we pick up.
Right. So, well, even before that, the lawyer warns, yes, this guy is going to be awful. He's going
Yeah,
to offend you potentially at points, but he's not a
that
murderer. Is the
that I
distinction that
did.
they're making?
That was one of the lawyering things that I did like. It's like getting up and saying like, this guy, what he's about to say, not all of you are going to like him, but it doesn't mean that he's guilty.
Right. And I think you can. It's interesting right when it jumps in because the way it's so this movie introduces one of my favorite things in fiction. It's the concept of the potential of a unreliable narrator
Right.
because we see this only ever through the lens of him telling the story. and it's not like like a true like, you do get the wavy transitions, but it's him telling this to a jury. So you have to always look at it and take it with a grain of salt what he's saying,
Right.
except for the parts that are presumably verified by the witnesses that testified beforehand that we didn't see. So you have to go through and go, here's the parts where he's telling the truth. Otherwise, he's outing himself as a liar to the jury. And they're kind of in these segments. So the first one is him talking about his Saturdays always meeting this one woman, Janice, in a bar,
Right.
in a, I don't know, middle upscale part of New York is kind of the image that you get, but it's always just a deserted bar. They find a booth in the back of the place. And in this relationship, we later soon find out that this is not his wife.
Not
He's
his
married.
wife. Yeah.
And this is some form of a girlfriend. When you watch this, when you first started seeing this interaction, and at this point you don't know the names, you don't know the interactions, I was struck by, oh, this is his love interest. This is the genuine relationship that he has. Because here you can see, I think it's the only interaction that he has that is like truly kind of heartfelt and genuine. You can
Genuine.
see that there's chemistry there. He's referring to Janice as Skipper. They're talking about getting a boat together, designing a boat, presumably going off together, something like that.
Well,
There's something genuinely here.
and I think it also helps that, and I start to get in the scene, but you really get it as the movie goes on. Would you agree with me in my assessment that I think Janice is probably the character in this movie that's, if not like completely like good, she's the most purest of heart, because I mean, she is having this kind of dalliance with this guy, but we're going to come to it, find out that she's not thrilled about potentially breaking up a marriage, and she ends up getting put upon and victimized a lot in this film,
Yeah,
by this guy.
she is genuinely the best person in here. She is a good person. She's also like a real character. She's not also just put up as like a victim and a puppet, I would argue, because she comes in with motivations
Right.
later on, right?
No, I didn't mean to imply that she doesn't,
Sure.
but I really do think that she gets, as bad as what happens to the other two women in this film, she really gets taken through a bunch of emotional turmoil at the hands of this guy.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where it's like it's such a nice interesting way of like introducing you to this guy, and it's you seeing him in what is probably like a genuine true relationship. I do think these two probably loved each other in
Hmm.
as much as this Larry creep could, but you're not really privy to that knowledge of like what his character fully is yet.
Right, but more so than his interactions with the other women in this film. There's some. You're right. There's something genuine between him and Janice. I feel
And
like
I would, oh, go on, sorry.
I feel like he lays on the charm, but he's not sleazy with her the way that he is with the other two.
Yeah, because that's where I think it's like there's really something there between these two. And I would argue this is one of the only areas with his interaction with women that you can trust his account of. Because
Hmm.
presumably this is what Janice's testimony also said, right? So this is it. There's no reason to think that there was a sexual relationship between those two at this point.
Right.
Um, and it's like
There's
minimally.
sparks.
Oh yeah, it's an
Yeah.
emotional affair to be sure. Again, talking
Yeah.
about this boat, I think that's them saying that they're going to leave together on it. If it wasn't overtly in the dialogue, like why are they talking about
Right. I almost thought
detailing a
at the
boat,
beginning
right?
here. I almost thought at the beginning here that he already, like, this was an ongoing thing, and he already had a plan to leave his wife for her.
Oh, I mean,
And when they first
yeah,
started talking, like, as soon as you start learning more about it, you realize what's actually going on. But what I'm
yeah.
saying is that there were enough sparks where I believed that this was already an affair, soon to be a relationship in motion.
Oh, I have no doubt there's, you know, I love you, baby. I'm going to be leaving her soon. That kind of
Yeah.
stuff. you know. So just like a really genuine kind of relationship, these Saturdays together. He notes, I mean, we don't have to go super detailed to here, but he notes that it's such a 1947 thing. Her cigarette case is broken and she needs a new
Hmm.
cigarette case. On the way home, he's smitten. He picks one up, goes home to his house. Oh, here's the reveal. His wife is there. You really find out, oh, he has this whole other relationship, and this is Greta, now woman number two, and she's there with all of her insufferable friends and relatives that Larry just can't stand.
Yeah, the friends who he calls boring, and the aunt who really hates him and is nothing but antagonistic. And it's such an interesting contrast because we just saw this scene with Janice where we said that there's sparks flying. Even when we see this polite conversation for other people between him and Greta, we can see that this is a marriage that, if not, is not at best is on terminal life support.
Oh yeah, I mean, and he plays it effectively. Like, comes in and you can see how he can like fake this with other people. He's rather smooth with his wife, but if it wasn't just so immediately juxtaposed to how he's interacting with the woman he's actually really clicking with, Janice, you would think that this is effective, but it's clearly not. And pretty
I
quickly
mean,
along the line, oh, so go on, go on.
to the point where, I mean, we just mentioned that he bought that nice new gold plated uh, cigarette case for Janice, and then is accused of forgetting what is it, their anniversary. So he kind of has to eat shit and give Greta the cigarette case and pretend like for the people who are there that, oh no, he always knew this is for her.
Yeah, and very quickly you find what his true motivation is being with Greta here is just purely the money.
Oh, she's loaded. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, she's old money. You never really find out why or where. It doesn't matter, right? She just has tons of money and he purely just married into it. Seemingly, I think they kind of said, like, from out of the war, just hooked up with her, and that's it. And that's
and
just
kind
the
of
whole motivation.
and kind of progressive in the sense that I don't know too many of these movies that come from this era where they say that the woman is loaded, but they imply that the money is all hers, and like it's not the husband's not entitled to it. Usually, when they get married, her money becomes his money.
Oh yeah, no, he's very much getting an allowance, right? Like you get that impression, that kind of a
Right.
thing. Eventually, she gives him like a pity job, buys him a job, is what it literally was at a point, right? So,
Yeah, we're going to get to that because even though this is a marriage on life support, it's interesting, and I think it's kind of cool that they make Greta a character who not only knows that, but is has already set a plan in motion for herself.
so that's where I think we have to look at that though with Larry's version of it, because what you can see is her being very loving with him and affectionate in front of witnesses.
Uh huh.
But
Oh, I
then
see.
I would argue anytime it's closed doors, her character changes when it's just Larry's account of it, right? And that's during her confrontational scenes or like when they're up at the ranch together later on. So it's like this is where I would argue you have to, because I think this script is great. It is great. And you have to kind of look at it that level. This isn't just me looking into it. The movie is challenging you to kind of question these things.
Right.
So we can kind of get into it. So anyhow, because advancing towards that, Larry kind of plays off Janice some more and says, I'll get you even a better cigarette case. And then they start hatching a plan of like, oh, they are going to leave together. They're going to go off to
Yeah.
Montreal
They're
together,
going to
right?
rendezvous in Montreal. Yes.
Right. So they set their plans. Larry goes home, talks about, hey, I'm going to go to Montreal, blah, blah, blah.
for
his
business, quote
for
unquote.
business, sure. And Greta, and this is where we have to kind of look at this, but she turns over the cards and calls Larry out on, listen, I know what's going on here. And she just flat out calls him out on it, that you're having, not saying an emotional affair, but you're having this. And she's like, I get it.
And
This isn't
yeah,
the life you wanted.
it's so nonchalant. I love there's like an exchange where he realizes that she knows, and he says something like, "I'm leaving." She goes, "I know, for good." And then the next line is, "So did you pack your cufflinks?" or something to that effect.
Yeah. So that's where I'm like, I bet you in the real world where this conversation happened, if I had to guess, she did call him on it. She caught him, but I don't think it's so robotic on her part. She
Oh, so
loves him.
you think this is him indulging a bit?
Oh, I think this is him setting the stage for her reaction later on. Just weird internalization of complex emotions.
Hmm.
I think in reality, she would kind of go, because her response is, I bought a company in LA and we're moving across the country.
I know.
I don't think, and I'm giving you a job there. I don't think her reaction to that, which is going to, like it or not, that's a lot of money. It's not going to be so like, well, I bought this and we're going to do this. It's going to be, I bought that. I think it's going to be her reacting a lot more. But he wants the audience to go, oh, she's internalizing, she's bottling this up later for what she ends up doing,
Okay.
right? I think this is him manipulating a little bit. He's a
Interesting.
manipulator in this movie, right?
He is a manipulator. You're right. You're right.
By the way,
This
I could be totally
this
wrong.
goes, no, but this goes to what you said. This movie is worth a second viewing.
Oh yeah, I would say it's turn off, go right back. It's shorter than an Avengers movie, watching it
Yeah.
back to back, right? So her response was, I caught this, I get it. You're a natural playboy. You don't like this lifestyle. That's okay. I'll give it something more that you want. I bought a managing interest of a firm out in LA. I got you a job there. I got 2 tickets, by the way, on a train to LA, not Montreal. Let's go. There in, pack your bags. I hope you're coming, right? So, and then they just go off, and he never spoke to Janice again, right? He
Right.
left her hanging until later on, right? So, off to LA we go. Then we see him in his role in this company, and you pretty much immediately see he's not terribly happy. He's no good at this job.
No, he. I mean, he's here because Greta made him, and he now owns 25% of this company.
It's
But I
just a
mean,
slightly less
it's
shaming allowance.
right, right. But you can see. I mean, we see a scene after we establish there of he was supposed to send some kind of like. So I guess they're brokers, they're financial advisors. So he
Right.
was supposed to send some letter to one of their clients and making that would have secured the firm like a huge account. And of course, he's so disinterested in the job that he never did that. So we first think.
Or he's just so lazy or incompetent or whatever. He just wasn't doing his job. He's doing a really poor job of it. I mean, that's the long and short of it.
Right. But he didn't
But
send this letter until enter Verna.
the famous Susan Hayward, and this
Yes.
is where you come in, and this is where this is the potential of the true femme fatale,
Right.
right? Because she has that very 1940s femme fatale way of speaking, the confidence, the way she carries herself, all that kind of a thing. That this is where if it wasn't just like a subversive movie in a lot of ways, this is that character.
Yes. Very
And
much
in a
so.
lot of ways, it's presented as that, right? So she comes in, saves his butt, whipped up a letter, signed it for Larry, gave it to the boss, gets him out of it, and he goes out and basically, the wheels are coming off again. This is another sexy lady. He can't help himself. here we go again.
And she
Right.
is throwing herself at him.
Right. And note that this is not one of the women that was in the court at the beginning. Right. And
Correct.
this is the Verna, the one that he's on trial for killing. In
Right.
fact.
So like when her name is introduced, I perked up. I was like, okay, so this is Verna.
Right. So that means, I think, once again, all of his interactions that aren't physically in a room with somebody else, you do have to look at critically. So it's like, was this truly their first interaction of her coming in and being the dominant person in this? Maybe. But here's where I'm arguing that he is always going to be painting her now as the corrupter, right?
Yes.
The femme fatale.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
I would argue, is that actually true? Right? We don't know. We can't know.
We don't know. Yeah.
Right. So that's where it's like, well, this is just the fun stuff of running through the scenarios in your head, because things get even more complicated as we go on. But very rapidly, you can see they have this chemistry again.
There's one thing that I think we can say with probably some certainty, because the boss ends up being one of the witnesses that was testifying in the trial, because he's there in the audience and as they're going through the witnesses. And when we introduce Verna, it's implied that she's kind of screwing the boss, right? That she's with him. She's a gold digger. She's with him for the money.
She admits it too.
Right.
Well,
So
at least in Larry's flashback.
Yes, but I'm pretty sure that guy probably testified that they were somehow involved or something to that effect. We don't know because we didn't see it, but I'm willing to believe the fact that she's a gold digger is true.
Probably. I'll concede that yes, probably. But even then, I think there's still doubt, because the way this all shakes out is you end up having 2 dead bodies at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody has any idea about any of the motivations of any of it. So what
Correct.
they're left with is having to look at it from the outside in and to apply some level of rationale to it to explain it to themselves. And they put that on Verna. It may be because it's just been her cumulative character to that point that we never see. But
it's
maybe
just
it
one of those
isn't.
things
You
where,
don't
like,
know.
I mean, she's involved with this boss. This boss is an older guy, not conventionally attractive. So chances are,
Yes.
I mean, not that he's
You're
ugly,
right.
but he's an older dude, and she's a younger woman. So chances are she's not with him for his body. You know, it's so I'm willing to, based on your framework of how, unreliable narrator, what can we or can we not trust, the fact that she was in some kind of romantic liaison with this older, higher authority figure does lend itself to the believability that she is a gold digger. That
I think
aspect of her character.
Yeah, I think that it's very probable, right? Because ultimately the boss there makes the jump that she was blackmailing Larry, right?
Right.
So it's not, that wouldn't be my first impulse if an acquaintance of mine died, that I would think that they got killed in a blackmail scheme gone wrong, right? So yeah, there's probably something up with her. So they are obviously starting to talk. You're seeing a lot of chemistry come up, but I would say it's immediately or very quickly evident that it's a different type of chemistry than you've seen with Janice, right?
Oh yes,
This one's much more sex oriented.
I mean, as far as his characterization of it, again with that caveat, this is much more aggressive. Not aggressive as in it comes to blows or anything, but it's much more like heated and charged. Whereas as Janice, it's kind of sweet.
Right. And it's the way, again, Larry's framing is that aggression was all from Verna. Because she pops up in his car. She asks, or they end up back in her apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Pretty quickly, if that's not like the first day or two. I mean,
I wasn't even sure if that was later that day that she brought in the letter.
It very well could be. So I had to laugh at the scene. So, Larry's in Verna's apartment. Her roommate is gone, which is the one you see at the trial at the very beginning.
Mhm.
The roommate's gone, and Larry's like, "Oh, I need to get home. I have to call my wife." And again, it's in the flashback, but I'm going to take it kind of at face value that we're the, God's eye looking in. It's a hilariously bad pantomimed, "Oh, hello." And it's like the dial tone still going on in the phone. "Oh, my wife's not there. Okay. Tell her I'm going to eat, downtown today." And he hangs
Mhm.
up. And it's just like the flimsiest attempt of trying to get himself out. But, oh, I have to stay, I guess. And it's just
Yeah,
funny looking in the background, Verna's just smiling at him. It's
I know.
framed where she's just like, okay, and then they do the soft fade. He's getting more drink, and then, "Hey, everybody, 1947 code for sex.
Fade to
It
black.
happened."
Yeah.
Yeah. So very clearly, this went from a very sweet, probably his right fit, to femme fatale pushing for a sexual relationship, just the temptress, just immediately, right? So off to a sexual relationship with her.
Uh-huh.
So w- then it basically is going through a lot of his, I'm having to have dinners and hidden away restaurants out of the way. He's sustaining a much more, you know flagrant um affair here with her. He's trying to hide it a little bit at least, but he's out being seen with her, obviously posing as a
He's
couple, right?
well, I was going to say he's trying to hide it, but she's so, blatant and forward and aggressive that it's really, how much can you hide someone who's acting that way?
Right. So this is the scene where they're at the restaurant and she goes off to powder her nose or whatever, Verna, right?
Right.
And Janice, there are this is the coincidence that you're allowed in the movie. She was there out on the West Coast covering whatever. She was like a, high society journalist, something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that. Yeah.
So she's out there and she comes out, and Larry chases her down. He sees her and, like, come on, dude. He runs after her because it's still like
And
his true love, I'll say.
right, and she's not happy, and rightly so.
Yeah, because she calls him out. You flatly stood me up. We were going to go to Montreal together, and I never heard from you.
And
And here
and
you are.
and I tried to convince myself of I came up with 1,000 excuses for you, and ultimately you played me.
Right. And to your point, Verna comes back down and is like on his arm instantly.
Hmm.
Just like, not playing along, I mean, this to me seems like a fair 101. If you see your partner who is married talking with somebody, hide around the corner for a little bit, bro code
And
something. I
I
don't
mean,
know.
and I mean, obviously, it doesn't help the situation. And I kind of wondered if that was going to be the last we saw of Janice, because I know she was at the trial, but I didn't know that she had any further involvement before he ends up getting caught.
Right. So what the next step basically is, he's having this sustained relationship with her, saying like probably a lot of the same stuff that he was telling Janice. But I mean, it's hard to say. It, does he want to be with her? Like, there's obviously the sexual connection, but her and Janice are polar opposite people,
Yes.
right? So
Well,
it's
I
hard to
don't.
say.
Whether or not he wants to be with her at first, I'm not sure. I think he's tempted for sure. But unlike Janice, who we had a whole scene where she said, as much as I love you, Larry, I don't want to be the person that breaks up a relationship or a marriage. Where total opposite with Verna, where it's like, oh no, you will be leaving her. Which one of us do you want? It's either her or me.
Right. Which the hand gets forced because he is out late with Verna, right?
Hmm.
He comes home, and who is up in the library? Their house has a library because she's that wealthy. She's just up waiting for him, comes in, and she catches him and calls him out on this all again,
Hmm.
right? And this point, again, she is. more disappointed, more depressed,
Yeah,
but still very much
much less
internalizing her response again.
internalizing the response, but where the first time was kind of like, whatever, kind of nonchalant. This one's a lot more sober. This conversation,
Again, I'm sure the framework of this conversation happened.
right?
Everything that led into it and led out of it. What happened behind those closed doors? Again, it's not the version that we saw. I think, right? So her response this time is, "All right,
It's
we're
the same
we're
thing.
getting
We're packing up and moving.
this time even more isolated. You're out. I'm selling the firm back to the old fart, and I bought a ranch out in the mountains. There's no telephone. There's no
There's a
mail.
general store.
Yeah, that you
That's
have to
about
take
it.
a horse to, basically.
Yeah,
And we're just going to go up there. And she basically says, I'm leaving tomorrow. I hope
you're
you'll
either
be
with
with
me or
me.
you're not. Yeah,
Right. So he does have one last interaction with Verna somewhere in here, right?
with
And
with the threat, of course, being that it's either Verna or no, it's either Greta or bye bye money
oh, I
again.
was going to say it's Verna or the money,
Yeah,
right? And we now are knowing Larry fairly well. He picks the money,
he's gonna go with the money. Yes, which
right? And
pisses off
Verna
Verna.
has right, which, by the way, there are witnesses in this one. The bartender, she has a overt emotional response and takes off, right? So again, I think that's all very true. I think a lot of the core of the Verna stuff is true.
Yeah,
I
I think
bet.
so too.
Just how much is him just being like, oh, I guess like she's offering.
Also,
No, it's
I
he
mean,
was, pushing it too. I bet.
but also too, I mean, you also have to wonder. Like, I tended to believe a lot of the stuff that he was saying, even though it's unreliable narrator, is mostly true because he's not. If you think he would be more self-serving if it wasn't true, he's not being painted in the best light, even with his own testimony.
Well, you're faced with two dead bodies by the end of this. I
Yeah,
think he did the cold thing of like, well, there's no way of getting out of this smelling too clean. So, what's the least shitty river to crawl through?
yeah, I suppose that's
And
true.
this
But
is
I
it.
mean,
I, it's tough, right? Because again, he is a good actor,
he's
really
charming.
interesting
He's
guy,
so
and
damn charming.
he is coming off sympathetic at points here because it does break back to the courtroom from time to time, and you're seeing him more and more just out of it. He's getting more drained. You're seeing him sink into his suit,
Well,
right? And
well,
it's like you're seeing it taken
and
out
we,
of him.
and not to spoil the end, but we're figuring out why. You figure out it's explained later why he's getting more and more dejected as the testimony goes on.
Sure. So, okay, he goes up to this, out in the middle of nowhere place, and you're introduced to the horses, which
Hmm.
are just fantastic. Um, which I'm going to put a lot of weight on one of these horses for storytelling coming up. But
Well,
you're in.
yeah, because I mean, the horse is ultimately what helps seals the deal for him later.
I count the horse as one of my witnesses to my
Yeah,
central, argument to the story. So anyhow, they're up there. Greta, you're told, is having the time of her life and just loves every moment of this.
loves the
And
has emotionally bonded with one of the horses,
right,
and I point
and
that out because it becomes a plot point.
yeah, oddly enough, and like one of the only like truly like um frame grab moments of the movie, because we didn't talk about it, but Pinchel, I think, is the director of this. He's one of those just workhorse 40s directors. He would have like three
Yeah,
movies a year. This didn't have, it's not like Double Indemnity or like a Hitchcock movie where it's like there's a lot of director to it. It's workhorse. It's a good script. It's good actors and perfectly fine direction, is what I would
right.
kind of say with the movie. So, anyhow, they're up here. And this is again where I'm like, I go back to like a movie like Eyes Wide Shut, believe it or not, of a thing of that movie is all about toxic men and just what
Hmm.
goes on in our dumb asshole heads around when you're just, got the ladies on the brain, because that whole movie is Tom Cruise putting himself into dangerous circumstance after dangerous circumstance and figuring out ways to do it just because he got a little jealous at his wife. Right? It's
Right.
a masterpiece of a movie. This is Larry doing the same thing in a 40s version of just putting himself into these toxic circumstances and finding ways to do it. And this is where I bet you he's lying through his teeth that Greta approached him and said, I want to build a guest house for that awful battle axe of an aunt to
Yeah.
come and stay with him. And he just leaps out of his chair and he's like, I know an architect in LA. Let me go down to the general store to start
Yeah,
calling.
I thought, yeah, because I thought that was funny. You're right, because Greta's been, at least according to his testimony, has always kind of been one step ahead of him with knowing what's going on, and she's moved him now twice to try to get him away from his affairs. So I don't necessarily buy that she would be like, "Yes, you go to LA and you find the architect with no
No,
supervision."
it's just not what happened.
Yeah,
I bet you he was like planting the seeds. Like, sure is lonely up here, and just slowly building, and then it's like Inception, planting the
yeah, and
idea in her head
yeah, and
that
it
she
must have been.
wants the aunt there.
It had to be his idea too, because I can't imagine Greta. I mean, she's not stupid, and so I would think that if she's trying to get this guy to stay with her, the last thing that she's going to suggest is build me a house for that aunt that you can't stand.
And what you can take from Greta is, I think she genuinely loves him.
Yeah,
And it's like, it's so sad, but she just loves him. And I bet you
Mhm.
she would have been happy there for, because you're not led to think it's too much time up there.
No, it feels like I would say maybe like a month.
Yeah, something in that range. There might have been some dialogue because he said for the first couple weeks or something, something in there. But it's like, I bet you she would have been happy up there with him for a very long time.
Right.
So again, this is one of those things where I'm like, not too many points am I going to call him out for an overt lie, but I bet you that was one. Because as soon
Yeah.
as she mentions this, he just leaps up, gives her a big hug, goes to the general store, and starts calling Verna
And she's not
immediately.
she's not at all suspicious, which doesn't fit with how she was in the last two vignettes.
No, because she was all over him, or
Right.
figured it out quickly. Because he's also like a sleaze, and it's like, I don't understand how people have affairs. I'm a married guy, and like, who has the energy? And it's like he's just out constantly for this, and it's like, yeah, she would know this immediately. And he's an alcoholic, he's a sex addict, he's a gambling addict.
Or
If you're
at the
with
very
them, you
least,
know the signs.
or at the very least, she would insist that she go with him.
Right. So I think this whole part is kind of iffy. But by the way, when we're at the general store, we're introduced to another one of those witnesses from the trial. This guy, by the way, as an aside, he looks to me just like Orson Welles and Citizen Kane in the old age makeup. Very
Yeah.
pinched kind of a face. Just as an aside. The newsreel at the beginning where he's talking about Hitler's never going to be a problem. Peace in Europe. Oops. So yeah, just as an aside. So immediately starts trying to retouch base with Verna and says, "Hey, I'm going to be in LA. Meet me at our bar at 2 o'clock." Right. And he gets to go
she
to LA.
she doesn't say anything. She listens to him and then hangs up.
Right. And he gets to go to LA. I think they might have said that Verna was off, doing whatever, but he's left unattended in the bad place, right? It's don't leave the alcoholic unattended in a bar, right? Who
Right.
has no sobriety under his belt, right? This is funniness there. So
Yeah.
anyhow,
Don't let the playboy go somewhere unattended.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So we go to the bar and Verna does show up, right? Leaves him
Yeah, she
hanging,
does.
right? Lets him twist in the wind a little bit, which good on her.
Uh huh.
So anyhow, they get back together and they restart it. And basically, Larry's getting the old thing back together here. In here somewhere is she's manipulating him by going out to an opera with the business guy. But we're seeing that they are now back together and they're starting to hatch a plan to like, how do we make this work once again, right?
Right.
Which
This
in oh, go on.
I was going to say this time though she wants some assurances and ergo a safety deposit.
Right. So this is now where we're getting into. I mean, it's a film noir with like essentially no gunplay, without any. It's debatable, frankly, at the end if any crime has been committed. Full
That's what
stop.
I was going to say. I didn't want to spoil it too early, but like I kind of wonder, is there a point to the trial?
Right. So I mean, we'll get to that, but
Right.
it's like this is now where it's like, okay, film noir, draw the shades, get the hard shadows. We're starting to enter into this because the plan is hatched. Basically, he's going to empty out their joint bank account,
And give the
Greta's and
money to
his.
her as a safety deposit, as a
Right.
assurances.
Which was today's equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars,
It was
something
something
like
like
that.
$25,000, right? It was a
Which
lot of
is,
money. 1947. Yeah,
yeah, better part of quarter of a million, something like that.
yeah.
So basically, he cuts her a check, and here's my assurance, and here you go, and they discuss let's drive off together. Right, is pretty much where it's at, and
You're gonna cut.
they
Well,
go
actually,
off.
you're gonna come meet me, and then we're gonna drive off together.
Yeah, because good on you. That's a very pertinent plot point.
Hmm.
They rendezvous at that general store where Orson Welles sees them,
Hmm.
or sees a woman, right?
Right.
So Verna and Larry go off, and you actually start seeing this is the first time where I'm starting to think like, okay, there may be actually something here that isn't just the passionate, naughty,
Well,
sexual
it's
affair.
well, it starts off by when she comes down there, it's revealed that this gold digging woman didn't cash the check.
Right. So you start seeing actual depth of character to her too. A little late in the game, but it's like each one of these characters, they're all the three main women characters, I'll say, are I think do stand up to the test of time.
Yes.
Greta's complicated, but you have to kind of wade through what's real there. But she's a real person. She wants to save her marriage, and you can see she's going through a lot of crap. Janice is just a good person.
Yeah, the actual virtuous one. Yeah.
Right. But not like blindly just princess caricature
No,
either,
no, no, no,
right?
no. But is the one who has genuinely good intentions.
Right. And then Janice or Verna finally
Verna.
is the one that we've only ever thought is the femme fatale, the gold digger. But oh wait, maybe she actually isn't. And
Hmm.
the check wasn't cashed. We can presumably verify that again by the framing device of the trial. So you do see that like she is a real person. Maybe there is going to be something to
Maybe she
this
actually does.
relationship between these two.
Maybe she actually does like him for him.
Right. Which I don't know why anybody would when you see like everything pulled back from him. But
Yeah,
no,
but
he is
again,
charming though, right?
that's what I was gonna say. They do a good enough job with him where I can see why, as sleazy and as two faced as this guy is, he's so kind of um, beguilingly charming that I could see why someone would be tempted.
But with Verna, I bet as soon as that quarter of a mil was gone, he'd be looking elsewhere.
Oh yeah,
He would be with Greta. I don't think he would be with Janice. There's something there with that relationship that if he could just figure out that he doesn't need their money, he could live an honest life, there would have been something there. But anyhow, so they have, I get the impression it would have been skinny dipping if it wasn't 1947. They have like a
yeah.
nice, interaction, like playful and genuine. And sex in the lake, because again, they're cuddling in the car afterwards. And here are where I would say there's two very surprising moments of the movie. This is the first one. Surprise, out of nowhere, genuine freak accident, car wreck, and Greta dies. Or not Greta, excuse me.
Verna,
Verna dies and is burned beyond recognition.
which throw again, you're right. It's genuinely shocking and throws me off because I'm like, well, then how is he on trial for her quote unquote murder? This was an accident.
Oh, and my mind is spinning because at the beginning it's like Greta and Verna, two close names, and I didn't pick up on it right away. And I'm like, hold on, which one? And I'm like spinning in kind of a good way. I wasn't confused, but it's like, oh, what's going on here?
Well, I was confused, but in a good way because like I was writing down
Right.
names as I was going through this, so I knew like okay, we're on trial for Verna's murder, but here we clearly see that she was not murdered. It was this freak accident, which I kind of had to laugh that even back in 1947, a car gets hit and then bursts into flames. Typical Hollywood.
Oh, it was straight out of The Simpsons. But of note in there, Verna bought him a ring, and an engagement ring, a promise ring, whatever you want to call it. And she was wearing a ring, which is a very important plot point because Larry survives, was thrown free from the wreck, right?
Yeah,
And by the way, again, everybody agrees this wreck was an accident. There are a bunch of witnesses, fluke, right?
yeah.
He wakes up in the hospital and sheriff shows up and is like, "Hey, my condolences, your wife died in the wreck." And he's like, "What?" Burn beyond recognition, but presumably, I don't know if they said it, but it would have been the reason. Finger, the ring,
Yeah,
right?
ring.
So they assume it's the
His
his
wife.
wife because the shopkeeper saw him take off with a woman,
Hmm.
not necessarily Verna. So this is where and this is where you really get the internal thing of him is he sees this as an opportunity, like immediately,
Hmm.
of what? Verna's gone, which he's not super broken up about this, which makes you think it was Verna and it still was Larry is looking at this as sex and money.
Hmm.
One temporary, and I'll just use the other for as long as I can. It's up for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
listener to decide which one I'm
Going
referring
from
to.
one vice to another. Yeah.
Right. It's because he looks at this as an opportunity of, oh, don't disagree with the cops. Even in his concussed mindset, he is play along with it because I'm going to go back to the ranch and shoot Greta
So yeah, yeah. So I
and
mean,
inherit her money.
and inherit her money. So he ends up telling the cop because the cop asks, needs some specifics. What was her name? And he says the person who died is Greta,
Right. So, I
who's
mean, that's
burned beyond
it's
recognition. Not only that, but like he even goes so far as some ambulance chase or funeral home guy comes up to him
oh,
to
I forgot
arrange
about that. Yeah.
to arrange what to do with the body. And he not only like gives him his business, but he says, "Take the body, burn it, and send the ashes to that horrible aunt." So he's going to make his plan is to make the aunt, like her family, think that she's dead too.
Oh, it's not it's like it quickly goes to like active lying rather than a lie of omission.
Yeah, yeah. So
So,
I started to wonder if this is where the trial was going to come in. That he. So I again get trying to
right.
think ahead.
So he gets up out of bed as fast as he can possibly imagine, right? Because I think he's even saying like I have to do something before Greta pops her head up out of the ranch. He hauls ass back up to the ranch, pulls out his gun, and he's admitting this to the jury, has every intention of murdering her in
To
cold
kill her.
blood.
Yeah.
And at this point, it sure seems like he is committed because everything you just said about he's
No,
sending it in a
and
gift basket to the aunt.
it really made me wonder: is the twist of this going to be that we're actually on trial for Greta's murder, who they because of his trickery and stuff got switched around? You know what I
Right.
mean?
So yeah.
But
And
but
go on.
it should be noted,
But
and I don't know if we said before, when he left with Verna, he tells her he left Greta a note saying, "I'm leaving.
oh,
Go get a
true.
divorce and forget about me."
Right. Also important. So when he's searching the house, ready to murder his wife in cold blood to collect on inheritance money, he can't find her. Right.
And the
He's
house
looking
looks
around,
empty.
looks empty. He looks for her best friend, this damn horse. It's gone. So they go to their favorite place, which is, by the way, the wilderness scene that we see during the opening
Opening
credits.
credits. Yeah, the
Right.
waterfall.
This is the ominous place, right? He goes out there and he realizes where the wife and the horse probably were. Goes out there and what
She beat him
finds a
to it.
note. Finds a note. What was it? Back at the apartment or at the waterfall?
At
At the
the
waterfall,
place, at the site, he finds the crumpled up goodbye note that he wrote her.
which is a suicide note. He goes out and finds that she threw herself off a cliff and killed herself.
Right.
Right? And his response is, well, that saves me some dirty work. Goes down there and throws her in the drink, right? Just into apparently a stagnant pond. We find out.
Great
So,
idea.
right. And then you're left with like, if you're only going to have like one really like hit you on the head directing moment in the movie, this is it. And I loved it, and I kind of like laugh at it at the same time. He looks up, and on the top of the cliff is just this majestic horse looking at
This
him like, you
horse.
son of a bitch, I'm gonna get
Yeah.
you. And it's just this horse is staring
One
at
way
him,
or another, I'm going to blow your cover.
and it's like, given that it's all in retrospect, it's funny, but he just looks up at it, it's just like foreboding, foreshadowing, and it's a great moment. It's a
Yeah.
little bit goofy, but I just loved it. So anyhow, here's the period of the movie where you think it's a repeat of Purple Noon, Talented Mr. Ripley. He
Yeah,
gets away
because I
with
mean,
it.
she's dead, so he gets the money, and he's living the good life in
Right, which in
down in Jamaica.
South America, he just went
Yeah.
everywhere. So he gets all the money and he just takes off for, this is now the time jump, months, right? He just says,
Yeah.
I lived in Rio. He's living the life, and he claims it was not fulfilling. I wonder, right? I don't know. But
Yeah.
anyhow, it brings him to what, Jamaica was where he's
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
And this is where he has another air quote accidental run in with Janice. And this is where I was like rolling my eyes a little bit of like, oh, that's pretty convenient. And it's not
But
true, right?
yes, we find out that it's not a coincidence.
Right. So good on you, movie. You fooled me. It's she is there and she plays it
She
off
right
as
because
coincidence.
we yeah, because we said that she said earlier she's some kind of like high end society journalist, and so she comes there under the guise of she was sent there for assignment, whatever.
Right.
Right.
So they start rekindling their relationship, supposedly, right?
Right.
And again, it's probably really genuine. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that there is a genuine reciprocal um, connection between these two. So,
Yes.
blah, 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 starting to get it going again. You know, Larry's like, hey, everything's turning up Millhouse, right? It's going to be good times. He goes to her hotel to meet up with her early, and shock of all shocks, it's his old boss from the firm, Verna's fling, and former boss is there to meet with Janice. He figures it out that, they're in cahoots. Well, he
Hmm.
sees Janice meeting with him. They're in
Right.
cahoots, and he is now the, the she's the bait, right? They're trying to reel
Yeah.
him in, and the boss is very suspicious, and he thinks, as we're told, that Verna, to his viewpoint, just disappeared off the face of the earth, right? That she was blackmailing Larry,
Mhm.
right? And that he killed her.
Right.
So they end up back in the States. This boss is like all over getting the police in. Larry's having a very hard time talking himself out or talking his way out of any of
Well,
this,
I mean,
right?
he does pull out all the stops too, because he also sends in Verna's roommate. Remember when he's getting like a massage somewhere, and he says the person comes in, you have a woman to see you. It's Verna Carlson, and he
Right.
gets this like look on his face, like who? And then he goes out, and it's not Verna Carlson. It's Verna Carlson's roommate, the dietitian who she said looks like a dietitian.
Right. And she's like, I need back rent. I'm forced to go to the police because Verna's stiffing me. And he's like, police? No, 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 no. Here's a check. I'll just pay your rent, which was exorbitant, by the way. If you do the inflation, it was just, where the hell are they living? He throws the money at her, like, don't go to the cops. Oh, wait. Cut to the boss holding that check too, right? Like, why would an
Right.
innocent man be
Because
paying?
she was another bait,
Right.
just like
So
Janice was.
he's now increasingly starting to get himself painted into a corner, and you're like, oh, okay, things are getting pretty juicy now. Search warrants are
Well,
enacted.
because we're waiting for him to get caught, because we already know there's a trial going. So it's a matter of how is the shoe going to drop?
Right. So search warrants are, put in place. They go up to the ranch. They find nothing. And
To
then
the
the
point,
bastard
and to the
horse,
point, to
right?
the point where like the cops who took him up there under the guise of this is a potential suspect are all of a sudden kind of shooting the shit with him because they find him so damn charming.
Oh yeah, they're like, it's just, it's a waste of time, all that kind of stuff. And then you have the uniform cop that's like the Boy Scout that happens to look over the edge of the cliff and sees the horse down in the ravine. Presumably, this horse jumped down there to try and get back to Greta,
Greta.
broke its legs. Yeah. And they go down. They're like, oh, we're going to have to plug this horse, right? Because it's hurt down here. So they're now 2 feet away from where he threw Greta, probably Greta, into the water, right? And oops, I'm just going to look away while you kill the horse. Huh, what's this? A decomposing body sitting right there, visible in the water.
I know. I love how they bring Larry back there. You don't see it, of course, because it's 1947. But
So,
you see,
yeah.
care to identify her, and they shoot the horse. And I swear to God, if they had cut back to that horse, and if that horse had fingers, he would have been flipping off Larry. Like, I'm about to die,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I got you. I
So,
got you.
the horse is the MVP of this. So, this is the thing where it's like, you can be probably pretty certain because they think that body is Verna because he's
Verna.
been sitting in the water decomposing, right?
Well, and he's already told authorities that the person who died in the crash was Greta.
Right. So the thing is, where if you have to like look outside of it, where is the evidence where you can probably figure out the bodies? The horse is the indicator to suggest that that was
That
very
had to be
likely
Greta.
Greta, right?
Yeah,
Because why would the horse go down there for Verna? So
Verna.
that's where it's like it's probably true what he's saying. Some of the details in there, right? So okay, you're back now to no more flashbacks. Just regular time. Jury, I rest my case. Jury adjourns for deliberation.
He rests his case. I get annoyed as a prosecutor that the prosecutor doesn't ask any cross examining questions, but we move
No,
on
this
from
was
that.
just this was just a soliloquy, right? No
I know.
no defense questions either. It's just get up there and monologue for an hour and a half, right? And we'll all sit
Right.
enraptured, which I probably would.
Yeah, but I mean, I
So
just the prosecutor was like, "You're not going to ask a single cross examination question." Fine.
no, no, we're all done here. That story is absurd. Let's all go home. So what you get is one last scene of Janice coming to visit Larry in, basically the cell, right? It's framed where it's just chicken wire bars between them talking. And at this point, you've never seen him so low at any point in the movie as he is right now. And he has, you know, this movie doesn't have like the Walter Neff spelt with two F's like Philadelphia or like Maltese Falcon like quotable lines, but there are a few good turns of phrase in
Mhm.
this. It's nicely written, and I can't quote it. I didn't write it down, but he said something to the effect of, "I listened to my story and I brought my own verdict in." You
Yeah,
know,
and
something
I
like that,
mean,
right?
and that's what I was going to say. The reason we find out he gets more and more dejected as he's telling his story goes to. I thought they were going to do a title drop here because it goes to the fact that he's thinking, as he's telling the story, the jury won't believe me. I don't
I might have
believe
thrown
me.
my beer can at the screen if they dropped the title, but you know,
I mean,
uh,
it wouldn't have been that much of a stretch him talking to Janice for him to drop the line, "They won't believe me."
no, you're right. So it is
But that's why he, as he goes on and on, he doesn't even believe himself, so he's convinced that no one else is going to believe him.
right, and it's like
And that Janice only believes him because she loves him.
I'll throw in a slight distinction there. She wants to believe him, right?
Right.
I think she wants to believe him because she does love him, but she doesn't know. Well, how the hell do you know how to handle this situation, right? Like the guy that you like, that the one you helped bring in, right? So she's horribly conflicted in this, right? Because
And
she does love him,
the one who ditched out on you not once but twice.
right? So she does genuinely like him. She reeled him in, but in the process of that, I think is genuinely falling for him again.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really nice, just sad scene, right? A lot of this is like it's film noir when there's somebody dead or whatever. You're not really stricken with it being, hit by emotion like sadness or depression. This is a downer scene, right? So pretty quick, just sour ending, and it's just like they're effectively, well, Larry's saying his goodbyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably. So it cuts to next morning. He's back in the court and the verdict's in. He sits there and this is nice direction here too in editing, because there's a lot of eyeline shots of like who he's looking at, and he's looking at the jury, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's true and all that stuff, but if you're anticipating being convicted, the jury won't look at you, because why would you look at the condemned guy?
Yeah, well,
It's at least a cliche,
it's a
right?
cliche. Whether or not that actually happens is up for debate. But he's there trying to scrutinize them for sure.
Right. So he's looking at him, and they make it very clear that none of the jury's looking at him.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and you get like one shot of a big open window in the court. The verdict's in, is giving to the judge, and then I'll say this was an absolute, genuine, jaw-dropping moment for me. I never saw this ending coming.
Well, it caught me off guard because I was kind of like waiting for the verdict to be read. So I was kind of like, I was watching the movie, but I was kind of doing something, and then someone screams, and like it kind of like jolted me.
Yeah, some stranger, you don't see who it is. Larry is bolting for the open window, which you see is, I don't know, 15 stories up. He's trying to kill himself. Just
Mm-hmm.
like made a split decision. I'm going to jump out this window. A no name bailiff shoots him. He drops dead, dies instantly in the courtroom.
And
And at that point, I'm like,
and here we have what I would call the quintessential perfect kind of noir ending
well, I
because
would say at this point, just roll the credits. We're done. Let's get out of here. Good, murky ending. Let's go. Let's get out of here. But also, here's where, well, we're talking about the code era of Hollywood. You can't
yes,
let the bad guy get away. This is where this is. I was wondering if you would have like strong opinions on this. It's the only air quotes fault of the movie. He's dead in the room. The judge is like, order in the court. Bailiff, for the record, read the final, verdict, please. And I'm like, we don't need this. Don't you want to clear the court?
no, well, you do want to clear the court, but again, I'm telling you, perfect noir ending because of
It
course they read
is.
the
It
verdict into the
is.
record, not guilty. They did believe him. Cut to black. The end.
Right. Which is a little bit of the zoinks ending, which I didn't need. I totally get it. You're right. Perfect noir ending. But
I know you didn't
I
need it. It was the for me it was kind of the cherry on top to a movie that I had genuinely enjoyed because I was
oh
enjoying the
yeah.
different kind of story and the style, and it ended kind of the way that I wanted to. I didn't at first I did not see the thing about him trying to kill himself and then getting shot, but then I after it happened I remembered, oh yes, 1947 Hayes Code, person who does wrongdoing can't kill himself, it has to be shot or taken to justice or whatever.
Yeah, they just don't get away with it. So this is where I think we can dive in a little bit to like now in retrospect, his final act is killing himself. Him talking to Janice at the end of like, I listened to the story and my verdict is in. This is where I think we can talk about whether anything actually happened here. From my 2 cents, my interpretation is he he did kill Greta at the end, but he's lying in that he presumably they would have seen gunshot wounds, right? So he was very careful to talk about a gun that was never established in the movie before, that my mode of killing her would have been this gun, but
Hmm.
I didn't. She killed herself by throwing this down. What you do see is he's dopey at times, but he's also smart when he needs to. That switching and like immediately jumping into killing Greta mode, like it makes me wonder like he's all if he's smart enough to immediately jump into that, he's smart enough to, not shoot her to death, like make it look like an accident as an out later on. But he would lie that I would have killed her with a gun, and then he threw her off the cliff.
Hmm.
Right? He went up there, he told her some story, let's go to our favorite place,
Or
and then whoop, and
yeah,
just pushed her over,
pushed
right?
her.
So, because I think the thing is like he's telling everybody this story, and in telling it, it's pulling his soul out of him, right? Of just going through these lies of all this. And the best outcome that he could give is I was going to kill her. I was set on it. I was going to murder my wife. But just dumb luck saw fit. And in telling that,
She
he's
beat me
like,
to it.
right. But in his mind, it's like, maybe this is where you could argue with that. Even making that decision in his mind was enough to make him guilty. I think it's that in telling the story, my interpretation is in telling the story, he couldn't sustain these lies anymore. He did kill his wife, and that he had to, you know, kill himself because of that, right?
Right. So
But
you think there actually was a crime committed then?
yeah, so what I would argue is, again, looking at all the evidence, Verna did die in that car wreck, and it was an accident. Inside of that, you can look at how much of that relationship was Larry's pushing versus hers, which is interesting in and of itself. But when
Hmm.
you get to the Greta part, I think he did commit the murder.
Interesting.
But again, like that's
It's
my 2 cents. But you can totally argue that him making that decision to kill her was guilty enough. Because at that
well,
point,
yeah.
what's
I mean,
really
at
the
that
difference?
no, at that point, I'll just get nerdy on you. And that at that point, it fits the law for attempted murder. He had a plan and was about to go through with it.
Yeah,
That's
for
enough
financial
to
gain.
that's but under the law of like attempt liability, he's already guilty.
Oh yeah, right. So it's like we haven't gotten or haven't brought it up, but this is where I have to point out that this movie was produced by Joan Harrison. Do you know
By
any
a
of the background of
woman.
this?
I know,
Right.
and she worked with because yes, I did because I watched the intro and outro from TCM and they mentioned her, and I was like, first of all, it's really it's really cool, and it's probably why this noir has more depth than your typical noir. Because I mean, how many women producers are there in 1947? But this
I
person,
have to imagine that she is a lot to credit for the strength of the three characters,
I
right?
think so too. I really do, and that's further evidenced by the fact that she worked with Hitchcock on Rebecca and on Foreign Correspondent, two movies that
And
come out of the same era.
nominated for Academy Awards for writing on those. So that's
Right.
where it's like the writing on this, I would argue, is so strong that this isn't me looking into this. This is the movie genuinely inviting you to play these games and interpret it yourself,
Well,
right?
I really
And
do.
there's no wrong answer, there's no right answer. You're not given enough by design to have it. So it's like it's
Ergo,
the
like you said,
perfect.
Ergo, like you said, it's a movie that invites multiple viewings.
Exactly. So it's just such a solid film, and apparently, what in my reading, it may have been in the TCM intros that you saw, but she wanted a much more murky kind of an ending to this,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Much more ambiguity.
She pushed for it, but code wouldn't allow it.
But that said, like, yeah, you get the definitive, like, Larry's dead by the end of the movie. Two out of the three women are dead. So it's as nicely tied off as you can get. Yet, like what we're talking about, there's still a tremendous amount of ambiguity. So
Mm-hmm.
even in that system where they had to have the bad guy lose in the end or get caught or justice, be rendered
Carried
onto
out.
him,
Yeah.
right? She still found, I'm going to give a ton of credit to her, right? Just because of the body of work of everything that she's done. I'm going to credit her of a lot of
Well,
this. She
and so
found a
much
ton of
so that
ambiguity and play space in there still.
right, and I think credit is rightly given to her again because this is, although this fits the film noir mold, and I certainly got the stuff that I wanted out of it when I selected this, thinking it was a film noir. It's written from such a unique and interesting perspective, where, like you said, everyone is given some kind of depth, and not to say that 1940s writing was shallow, but you don't always get that in these kind of genre films
Oh,
of
you
the
could, I
time.
would, you could get just schlock film noir movies, right? It's
Right,
not everything was going to be Maltese Falcon or Double Indemnity, right?
right.
The absolute amazing ones. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of crap, just gangster crap type of things, or like the very cliched femme fatale stuff. And then you have like, I couldn't be happier you picked this one because this was just like a hidden thing I was not aware of. It subverts a lot of the expectations for the thing. And like you said, or we said, was there even a crime committed at any point in the movie?
Right.
You don't know. I would argue probably, but maybe not, right? And it's just, oh, so cool. So
Yeah.
we
No,
are
I
really
mean,
at it. I don't know. Final thoughts on it?
final thoughts. I'm. This sounded good from the little blurb that you gave me, and at the end of the day, having seen it, having discussed it with you, I'm really glad that I picked it. And we always come to the final analysis, and this is does this hold up? I think it does. I think it's a sterling example of breaking the mold and making something unique at a time when there was a lot of schlock and a lot of copycats, and this was kind of becoming a cliched genre. Because I mean, film noir as a as a archetype really didn't go much beyond like 1951, 52.
Right. So, really, I would echo all that. I would say that this should be a lot more kind of recognized out there. Because for the fun of it, I started like, best film noir movies and whatever Google puts up at the top. This wasn't in there. And I'm like, why not? Just because it wasn't Humphrey Bogart, it wasn't like super stylistically directed. No,
Well,
this
I
was
mean,
just a solid film.
yeah, I mean, there's not that, like, no disrespect to anyone who's in there, but there's not like that name that you put on that's above the title for this,
Susan Hayward, and
kind
then
of, yes.
Larry,
Robert Young.
yeah, Robert Young playing against type, right? So yeah, it totally stands the test of time in that it's a film noir that totally stands up, and I would say really, really solid writing.
And I think it's found somewhat of a cult audience. I mean, even on something as skewed and as sometimes unreliable as IMDb, I think I went on there. It's got like a 7.2 or 7.1, which is
Could be
decent
confirmation
enough.
bias. If you're going out looking for this, you're likely to like it. Who knows?
Well, I mean, I
That's
looked it up
my
beforehand.
scientist mind coming out.
I looked it up beforehand, and I was like, okay, 7.1, 7.2. We may not be watching a piece of shit, and we weren't. It was really good.
No. All right. Recommended. The only easy way to really get this one is Blu-ray, unfortunately, but I would say it's worth it. It's inexpensive. It's a bare bone
If you
DVD,
like,
but the transfer is great.
if you like the genre, absolutely, it's worth it.
Yeah, totally.
I'm not
All
mad that I
right.
own this now.
No, I'm happy this isn't the collection, right? So, shall we now transition to what the upcoming movie for August is going to be?
Yes, it is once again your turn, and I'm eagerly awaiting what's going to come at me next month.
All right, so I ran the random number generator, and these were the 5 films that I was left to pick from. First, 1931, a comedy called The Smiling Lieutenant. A misfired flirtation lands a young lieutenant married to a princess instead of one he loves. If that wasn't a comedy, like put that in film noir category, that might sound a little bit more appealing.
No, but it's definitely comedy because I recognize the actors, Maurice Chevalier and Claudette Colbert. Those are two comedic actors.
Right. 1953's Tokyo Story. An aging couple visits their children in Tokyo only to find headache and rejection. Japanese
Heartache.
film. Oh, heartache.
They find
What did I
heartache,
say?
heartache, not a migraine. You said headache.
Oh, headache. Tells you where I'm at a lot of the time. Next, 1949, Neptune's Daughter. Mistaken identity complicates a polo player's romance with a bathing suit designer.
Again, interesting cast here. Red Skelton, another well-known actor, and of course, you and I being Star Trek fans, Ricardo Montalban apparently is in this.
In a musical. I love me some Red Skelton, actually. Next up, 1961, Pocketful of Miracles. An aging fruit vendor who has been deceiving her grown daughter that she's a wealthy millionaire gets in a pickle when her daughter announces her arrival in the States with her new fiance. The description goes on, but I'm going to say
No,
that
but
one.
again, notable director Frank Capra, well-known
Yeah.
director, directed a lot of classics, and starring Betty Davis.
Mm-hmm. And then, again, not messing with this system at all. It's pretty remarkable that 4 lesser known movies, I would say, and then a 5th big one has happened each one of these. Because the 5th movie is 1932's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
And we all know we all know what that's about.
Yeah, I'm not going to bother with the description there. That's a very famous one. It's legendary, maybe as much for the transition that you see. That's one of the most groundbreaking special effects ever. That's kind of the most famous aspect of that movie, I would say. So we have a couple comedies, a musical, Japanese
A horror,
classic drama, and classical horror.
sci-fi
right?
horror, yeah.
Yeah. So, Matt, do you have anything that you were really hoping for and or prediction that was going to be my selection?
Unlike that first month for prediction, I genuinely have no idea. This is such a wide, diverse range of options. I could really see you going with any of them. It's not been your style to go for the most well known, but I could see you doing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. As far as what I would hope for, I don't know, because like there's something that I like about each of these, whether it's casting or who's directing or even just the kind of genre that we've done. We've done 2 kind of heavy dramas for our first 2 shows, so it's interesting to see that we hit kind of the comedy and musical selections this time around.
Do you have a want, though?
Do I have a want?
I'm going to put you on the spot.
I mean, just because I like Frank Capra and Betty Davis, I guess, Pocketful of Miracles, but again, I'm kind of good with whatever, because this is such an interesting month.
Surprising, because I would have thought you being the horror guy that you would have definitely locked in on Dr. Jekyll.
I mean, again, I would love to see that, but I wasn't locking in on that because we, at least so far, you've gone against the grain and not chosen the the well known movie.
Right. All right. Well, my selection, going against the grain, I have selected Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Okay, I am not mad at all.
I figure it's time we go back to one of the absolute classics, right? And I have not seen this. I couldn't be more excited
I
to
I have not
check it
seen this
out.
either, but from but it sounds like you said that this is what a lot of people consider to be the definitive version. So I'm quite excited to see it.
Definitive. I mean, there's a million versions, and oddly enough, this month or August coming up, TCM is showing every version they have, including of like the Abbott and Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Right.
So
Oh,
it's
that
like
would
a Dr.
that
Jekyll,
would
Mr. Hyde
now
month.
if that had ended up on the list, that would have been my pick.
Right. So I went back through and it's like they're showing a ton of them. So I don't know what the definitive one was or is. There's been so many versions of this movie, but it's got some groundbreaking elements to it. So it's definitely a very famous version of it. So,
Right.
all right. Shall we call it good? Matt, do you want to
Yeah.
talk about where we could contact you online?
Yeah, you can always reach me on Twitter. I'm at mhansen0207 HANSEN.
And I can be found on Twitter at ProSubZero, PROSUBZERO. And we can be found on Twitter also under the TCM Challenge. And if you want to continue the conversation here, give us some heads up on what we're getting into with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Let us know about Purple Noon. Continue the conversation. Did you have a completely different interpretation of what Larry may or may not have been guilty of, and they won't believe me? The conversation can continue at our email at tcmchallenge@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out. More than happy to interact with people there. So, Matt, I'm Matt in Buffalo.
And I'm Matt in Arizona. Thank you so much for joining us for this month's TCM challenge, where we take a look at old movies and we too write our own verdicts.